Hi, it's Dwyer, dwyervip.com. Let's do forensics on my Week 6 picks in the NFL for 2015. I had a terrible week. I'm not happy about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I had a terrible week. It was my first losing week of the year. Let's go through it game by game. Let's start with two blown picks. I had the Giants getting 4.5 points on the road at Philly. Giants got blown out in this game. Philly had 24 first downs. The Giants only had 18. Philly had more rushing yards. Philly had more passing yards. Philly had about 175 more total yards. Right? That's a blown pick. The Giants are a little bit enigmatic. Next week, they're going to be home against Dallas off a bye. That game's going to be interesting because Dallas will have a new quarterback, Matt Castle, and the rumor is that Dez Bryant is going to play. Understand the Giants right now need to regroup because the NFC East remains wide open. As for Philadelphia, they're on the road against an unbeaten Carolina Panthers team. Right? Carolina, of course, is coming off of a big road victory against the defending NFC champion Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. Right? That's going to be an interesting matchup next week. The second game that I just lost outright, I had Seattle laying 6.5 over the Carolina Panthers. Right? The line even moved in my direction. Seattle ended up getting beaten in the game. Seattle seems to have a problem playing in the fourth quarter. Let me go one step further. Seattle seems to have a particular problem dealing with tight ends. Right? Tyler Eifert, a few weeks ago, their game against Cincinnati when they gave up a 17-point fourth quarter lead. Here you have Greg Olsen scoring the winning touchdown. And it's a bit baffling. I do have sour grapes here. Because, of course, they started well. They were roughing up Cam Newton, who threw some interceptions. Right? But still, Cam Newton, as it is, had a less than 70 quarterback rating. But the stat of the game was the fact that Seattle only managed at home 14 first downs. Right? Something is very wrong with Seattle's offensive line. I was on the wrong side of that play. Now, a couple other games were just, well, let's just go through the data. Right side, wrong line. Right? I had the New England Patriots, but I laid 7.5 points. Now, the line here went my way, right? Because by game time, this line was up to 9. They were playing Indy in Indy, right? New England won the game, but they only won the game by 7, right? Bottom line is it's a loss. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Let me just say this, though, and I understand the stats don't bear this out. If you look at the game, you need to be concerned, very concerned, about the state of Andrew Luck's shoulder. Right? He was not putting zip on the ball. I know many people are going to say 312 passing yards, 3 TDs. What's not to like? Andrew Luck is back. I'm just telling you, Andrew Luck didn't go deep as often as he normally does. Right? He was throwing little, flares out there. Dare I say, this almost looked like a Peyton Manning performance. I'm talking about Peyton Manning circa 2015. Let me also say, too, forget the, play everyone's harping on, that, fake kick, right? Indianapolis at home had 11 penalties for 103 yards. You need to pay close attention to Chuck Pagano's relationship with his players. He had a little bit of a dust-up early in the year criticizing Andrew Luck. When you see a coach's team, and they're going to have to pay attention to this in Buffalo, when you see a coach's team have a lot of penalties, especially in home games, you have to wonder what's going on. Right? Another bad call. I told you it was a bad week. Right side, wrong line. Was I had the Green Bay Packers laying 9 points at home. In fact, laying 10 points at home against the San Diego Chargers. Now, let's face it. No gambler at this point should rely on Eddie Lacy. Right? Eddie Lacy missing in action. 4 carries, 3 yards. Right? Starks was the one who carried the rushing load with 112 yards rushing. Let me say this too. It's staggering when Green Bay is playing at home. I know Green Bay won the game, but they didn't cover. It's staggering when Green Bay played at home and gives up 548 total yards to an opponent. Right? San Diego dominated the time of possession, 38 minutes. Green Bay, simply put, is lucky it won this game. Right? For this gambler, didn't win the game by as much as I had hoped. Right? Less fair for me. Another game that did not pay off, didn't win but didn't lose this game. I had Detroit at home, laying 3 points over the Chicago Bears. Now, I don't know what's going on with Detroit. I understand fantasy people are very happy. Matthew Stafford threw for 4 TDs. Good for him. Detroit, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be able to translate what they're doing into an advantage over the other team. Right? They had about 100 more total yards than the Bears. Right? But, Stafford, again, is hitting guys for touchdowns at home in a must-win game for Detroit. But curiously, this game had to go into overtime. Right? The line was 3. Detroit won by 3. The casino gave me my money back on this because it was a push, but I didn't win it. Right? So this was another right side, wrong line situation for me. Finally, the last game. Cincinnati minus 3.5 over Buffalo. I took Cincinnati. They delivered. Now, I know Andy Dalton this year has a lot of skeptics. Right? Colin Cowherd kills him on Fox News every time he talks about Andy Dalton. Just to understand, Andy Dalton right now is playing at a very high level. Right? I don't buy the argument, being raised by many, that because his arm isn't a Ryan Mallett type gun, that Andy Dalton will never be an elite quarterback. That's absurd. Right? Because, of course, we know some guys with guns. Ryan Mallett, for example, certainly hasn't done anything to be deemed an elite quarterback as of yet. The quarterback position is really cerebral. Think about the best quarterbacks you've seen in your life, or the best quarterbacks in NFL history. Joe Montana didn't have a gun. Johnny Unitas didn't have a gun. Right? I would argue Drew Brees right now doesn't have a gun. Right? There's something called quarterbacking. Andy Dalton is doing that. The light seems to have gone on. The position is a position that takes several years to learn. Now, I'll agree. He has a lot of weapons at his disposal. Don't sleep on one of the biggest weapons, his offensive coordinator, Hugh Jackson. Understand, this is a guy who was 8-8 coaching the Raiders, right? You know the politics with the Raiders, dysfunctional team, good coaches. Tom Cable's another one, who had success with the Raiders, somehow end up losing their jobs. But the stuff Hugh Jackson's doing right now with Andy Dalton is off the page. Just look at these numbers. 3 TDs in this game against Buffalo. I thought Buffalo was supposed to be a big-time defense. Isn't that what we were sold? Right? Andy Dalton had a quarterback rating against them over 118, folks. Right? Understand, too, Giovanni Bernard, it's not like they were packing the box, daring Andy to throw the ball. because Giovanni Bernard averaged 6 yards a carry. Right? So keep a close eye on Cincinnati. I'll agree to the folks in Pittsburgh that you've won a couple of games in Ben Roethlisberger's absence. And when Big Ben comes back, Pittsburgh looks like a very live dog to upset the apple cart in the AFC. But everyone needs to understand that Cincinnati's playing at a very high level. Think about their last 2 weeks. Comeback win over the Seattle Seahawks. Then they follow that up on the road with a victory over Buffalo. This team is beating teams that, have reputations, had success last year. Right? And Andy Dalton, quite frankly, is doing it in style. Is it possible that Dalton, who didn't have the benefit Aaron Rodgers had of starting his career carrying a clipboard for years, is it possible that Andy Dalton is just now hitting the sweet spot of his career? Right? The sweet spot of his understanding of the game. Is it possible that the game has slowed down for him? Let me say this too. There seems to be a changing of the guard among quarterbacks in the National Football League. Right? Drew Brees, and I understand Drew Brees looked good against the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, great. But Drew Brees is having an off year. Just look at the numbers. Right? If you look at the games, you'll realize something's badly wrong with Peyton Manning. I'm not kidding when I say I'll be surprised if Manning, who isn't a god in the postseason, and who has been fading late in seasons of late, I'll be surprised if Peyton Manning, if he continues to look as bad on film as he's looking, right? Throwing wounded ducks. Looks like he could read defenses, but let's just put it this way. Compared to Andy Dalton right now, Andy Dalton looks like he has a Ryan Mallett arm compared to Peyton Manning. Right? One wonders if Peyton Manning has the physical tools to play quarterback at a high level in the NFL. Now I know, Denver Bronco fan watching this video is going to say, hey, wait, whoa, didn't we just beat Cleveland? Right? When's the last time you were this happy to beat Cleveland? Also, isn't the Peyton Manning all of us grew up with a guy who would throw 3-4 TDs in a game? Right? Now you're looking at games, and quite frankly, those multiple touchdown games, they're rare. They're rare. The Emmanuel Sanders touchdown this last weekend, wasn't that mainly Emmanuel Sanders? That wasn't really Peyton Manning throwing the ball deep. So I have questions about Denver, unbeaten team, not making the playoffs. They'll make the playoffs, right? But being able to thrive in the playoffs. Wasn't that Denver wilting in a home game in the playoffs last year against Indianapolis? Right? So to me, if we're living in the past, we're going to look at guys like Peyton Manning and say, oh my goodness, let's all bow down. Future Hall of Famer. Okay, great. His body of work historically is great. If we're looking at football today in 2015, don't we have to look more closely at Andy Dalton? Don't we have to look more closely at Cam Newton? Aren't there a host of young quarterbacks, not named Andrew Luck, who deserve our attention? Anyway, just know I had a bad week last week. 2 completely blown picks. 2 right side, wrong line. Another one a push. I'm going to try to bounce back. First losing week of the season, a month and a half in, on to week 7. Right? Let me just say too, in gambling, there's big risk involved. Right? I'm going to have rough weeks. I'm going to have good weeks. It's going to be up and down. Right? There's risk involved. All I can say is, yes, I got it handed to me this week. No question about it. Thanks for stopping by. Let me know your thoughts. Leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks. Oh, and of course, Week 7's picks will be posted at dwyervip.com. Thanks for stopping by.